Alan, thank you so much for joining us here for another episode of Starting Over with Shannon and to talk about a topic that I think is very, very relevant for the audience and relevant for me too with this stage of life that I find myself in. So, very much looking forward to this conversation.
Good and nice to chat with you, Shannon.
So, one of the themes in your book, Realize Your Power, is have a clear philosophy about the purpose of your life. And you invite people to take personal responsibility in particular and wake up to the fact that they're in charge of their own life, they're a co-creator of their own life, and we have more power than what we realize. And I was wondering whether there was a point in your life where you had that realization and it shifted how you chose to live.
I guess I feel blessed. I've had challenges like a lot of people, but I've seemingly overcome them what I would consider to be in quite an effective way. And I've always felt quite empowered. But I suppose it was a stage when several things happened that were really kind of difficult together, stacked on top of each other, that it made me really kind of question the whole concept of purpose and fulfillment. And it was around that time that I really started to maybe have a little bit more kind of direction and started proceeding along the route of finding out what's going to really feed my soul.
Yeah. What was that?
Well, I guess you move from the achievement thing to the fulfillment thing, don't you? And you realize it like steps of achieving stuff from financial freedom and travel and business. That's great, but that's not really going to feed you until you start focusing on growing and then giving your contribution. So when you start doing that, it just feeds you, and you've got much clearer sense of purpose in your life.
Yeah, I see that. And you really have, judging from your background, you've been somebody who's pivoted quite a lot. I mean, it's common these days in the sense that nobody's really doing like one career for life. And we are, fortunately, many of us in this position where we have enough of our survival basic needs being met that we can go into this self-actualization process and start asking, well, actually, where do I find meaning and what is going to fulfill me and so on. But was there something that triggered this for you in terms of a personal part of your story, or a realization at work that you were like, okay, I need to do something different?
Yeah, I don't know if there was a particular one. I mean, I had a really bad skiing accident. I nearly died and I got helicoptered off a hill, and it really kind of made you focus on your mortality.
Okay, Alan, you
Perhaps
say that way too blasé. Sorry.
well, perhaps that was it, but I wasn't kind of conscious aware of that at the time that this is a moment. But perhaps it was just lots of things that put you in a direction, and maybe we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to find a moment that's going to change everything, or find the one thing that's going to steer us in a direction, or it's going to give us that clarity. Life's about enjoying the experience as well as creating. So take the pressure off a little bit, I would say to others. And back to your question, I don't know maybe if there was a particular moment, but that's maybe something that was important.
Yeah, it sounds like that could be important. Side note there, that is actually pretty significant. I mean, when you say ski accident, I thought that meant like, you fall over and you hurt your ankle a little bit, but sounds a little bit worse
Yeah,
than that.
no, it's a bit more substantial than that. Helicopter off the hill and unconscious and not sure if I make it and all those things. But, lots of people have stories like that. And most of us have situations like that we're not even aware of. We were close to the end of our life. So appreciating our mortality is really a good place to start to appreciate the gift of life and the opportunities we have.
I guess it helps us to zoom out and take some perspective, which is something we all actually could do a little bit more frequently, I've got to say, when we live in that moment of all the things we have to do,
Yeah.
all the tasks we have to tick off of our list, that we kind of forget to zoom out and prioritize more effectively.
100%. I agree so much with that. I did a talk to some kids in school the other day, and I started off with, for about 150,000 people around the world today, it's a special, special day. Why? And they come up with all this stuff. And of course, it's because it's their last day. It's their last breath day. And you start with that, and it really kind of arrests people into the moment a little bit and start to help them have some focus on what's important to them in their life. And it is a good place to start. If you look back in your life at that moment, what would have been important to you? And it's a great exercise to do. And what would
Yeah.
have been probably wouldn't have been material possessions you accumulated. It probably wouldn't have been seemed to be right over some trivial shit in an argument. It probably wouldn't have been how cool you were. And if you start to ask those questions, you might sort of bring yourself to a little bit more focus on what is important, your values and your purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to your previous point, I actually love that you mentioned about how we often seek like one defining moment of our life or something that's really going to shift directions. And for many people that does happen. But I actually think that really links to the piece about people putting too much pressure on themselves in terms of finding clarity. Like as if I think actually just rewriting what clarity is in the first place, because I think people often think it like has to be that one career or vocation that I'm destined to do, and that's my calling. And I think it actually makes finding clarity much more elusive.
Oh, I really agree with you because, you know what, I put pressure on yourself. You've got this gift of being alive, and who's to say what's the right way to live your life? How do you know if you're living a great life? Who decides that? Well, sooner or later you realize it can only be measured in terms of the impact you have on other life and contribution and so on. And the more you grow, the more you'll be able to do that. But where's the pressure coming from? It's probably coming because you're comparing yourself to something, or you're judging yourself against someone else's standards, which really comes back to you seeking validation from something outside yourself. And when you tune back into really appreciating yourself, and like all self-improvement work starts with self-love. When you start there, you won't need that from anyone else, and you'll get the answers to your questions much clearer if you listen to your heart and your soul.
Yeah, I love that. I'm hearing a lot about the importance of service here for you and making an impact and being of contribution. Do you think that's a really key theme in
Yeah,
finding
look,
fulfillment?
it's no coincidence that all spiritual leaders talk about that, and all self-empowerment coaches and therapists talk about that contribution beyond yourself. It's only in doing that you'll start to really feed yourself, and it's critical. And so I decided to really do that. And so I decided in all the work I do in this area, all the profit from it, I give back to young people to help them make the most of their lives. And I'm fortunate to be in a position to do that. So I live and breathe that stuff. And I find that giving makes you feel great. It's good for you and it's good for everyone else. And as I said at the start, it's no coincidence that any self-help book will talk about service and contribution. So live that as much as you can and see how it feels.
Yeah, I see that. Talk us a little bit through what it is that you do, because when I came across you, I was so captivated by the work that you do. And what of course stood out was the impact that you're making and across people who are vulnerable in society. And that's so much more needed. I also love your brand, Less Ego. That's really cool. I don't know if you do shipping to Switzerland, but I wanted to get one of your Less Ego caps.
Oh, well, I'll send you one. Send me over your address. I'll send you one.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, there's a few things there you've asked me, but just about the less ego thing. I mean, a lot of it comes down to ego, which is really just fear, isn't it? The fear we won't be loved, fear. That's what it is. That's why we do things. And it drives so many people, but it's not feeding them. So yeah, the less ego brand is a good one. And I think it's a message that everyone can embrace. What the world needs more of definitely is less ego. So, just back to your point about the work I'm doing in this area is I focus the contribution in the giving free resources to young people, because they're at a stage where they can really make a difference and they can unravel a lot of the issues of my generation have created. And a lot of our problems will only be changed by their thinking and their feeling of what's important and their sense of contribution as well. And I'm not saying it's too late for me. You're a lot younger than me, but it's not too late for me to do that. But I can have much more impact if I reach younger people and get them out of the situation before it's too late. And I use the phrase of helping people before they become messed up older people.
Yeah, okay. Does that work on them?
Yeah, they're sometimes a little bit less receptive at the start, especially, the school groups I speak to, but you've got to find something that gets some leverage with them that helps them and gives them a reason. But who doesn't want to make the most of their life? And for young people, that their sense of distance and time is slightly different, but they want to make the most of their life. When you give them some simple exercises of controlling their thinking and visualizing and things like that, they're like, oh, okay, this isn't just bullshit. And, they'll change and that'll be better for everyone.
Yeah. So I want to go over to some barriers that people face around having clarity. And, this had come up for me even a lot personally with choosing to do podcasting or then going into coaching, and who in particular do I want to help? And of course, I'm bringing up all of those questions around what is the next right step and how do I do it? And I think often when we think about getting clarity, or we know in the absence actually of clarity that can bring a lot of stress and overwhelm and anxiety and feelings of confusion and inertia as well. Like we don't act because we're stuck in that overthinking space that we don't know the next right step. So we just stay paralyzed. But actually I was doing a bit of research into this, and what I found a really interesting point is that oftentimes it is the fears and the doubts and the insecurities which actually precede clarity. Is that something you would attest to?
Oh, definitely. A lot of it's fear, isn't it? It's a fear, and then it's the programming around your beliefs and your values. But what is the fear really? And you have to keep examining that yourself. And usually, it will come back to you. You're scared of what someone else will think of you, which come down to love. It's very rarely actually a fear of losing something financially or material. It's very rarely that when you drill down to it. So you've really got to examine that and be honest with yourself around that.
It's not loss of financial things. I would think that would be a big fear of people. You're saying it's not? It's more like love or rejection or
Yeah, well, people think it is, but usually the loss that you're talking about for people financially is not. Started talking about podcasts and this and that. When you change your tack, that doesn't probably make much difference to your financial position. It's not going to be a disaster for you if you change sort of direction. So I think we might position it as, oh, I can't do that. I might risk losing something, and that becomes maybe a barrier as well. But I think usually it's a fear of like you're not enough. It's a fear of I'm not good enough to do it. That's really what it is sometimes.
yeah. And also strangely, so we have the fear of failure, fear of not being enough, fear of making the wrong choice. I think that comes up a lot when people are wondering what next step to take, whether to repivot their professional life or leave their partner or whatever. It's like, oh, I'm so frightened of making the wrong choice that I do choose to do nothing.
And that really translates when I hear you say that to I only am going to make a choice when it's absolutely certain it's the right choice and there's no risk. And life doesn't work like that. There's a risk side to everything we do. And sometimes people's issue around clarity really drills down to they feel there's just not absolute 100% no risk certainty with the right choice to make. And when you free yourself from needing to, that's a form of control, really. When you feel yourself from needing that control over the situation and go, I don't know if this will be the situation that'll give me the best outcome, but I'm going to do it. And then you build your sense of like self. I did that. I made a choice, and you'll start sort of stacking on that, and you'll make better choices. And you'll realize we don't know what our choices will lead to. And often we make a choice that we think that maybe wasn't a choice I would have made in hindsight, but it led to so much different things. So just back without going over and over the same point, but I think is really, really important to say to people that sometimes a lack of clarity is you just don't want to move until you're 100% sure.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And I think a lot of people either are not aware of that it's really a fear of uncertainty, fear of the unknown, and not having an appetite for any risk. But the fear of control also comes up a lot, or fear of losing control, I should say. Is there anything that has helped you to shift your mindset around that?
Yeah, I want to be in 100% control of me. That's the point. If it's outside of you, relax. You can't control other people and what they're going to do. I can't control the weather today. There's so much stuff I can't control. But I 100% want to be in control of me, how I respond, how I feel, how I move myself out of not feeling good, and the directions and choices I take. And that's where control is essential. So people are trying, I don't want to be so controlling. Yeah, you do, but control yourself, not others. So I'm all about that. Work on that, the inner control.
And it comes back to what we said at the start with the personal responsibility. I guess it goes hand in hand.
Do you not want to take personal responsibility? I say to people, do you want someone else to be responsible for you? And we do grow up dependent for a long, long, long time, and we're kind of programmed to not be responsible. And I would say maybe successful is not the right word, but more effective, successful parenting is around giving your children responsibility early and letting them feel that sense. And you see people who have been dependent maybe a bit longer than they needed to, or spoilt or treated in ways that haven't helped them have that. So yeah, all about that personal responsibility. Why would you not want to be the driver of your own life?
Yeah. I mean, thinking that on the devil's advocate part, because I think people in abstract, yes, they want to be in the driver's seat, not the passenger seat of their life, and they want to feel autonomous and have control. But yet so many of us are like, but I would prefer to have the guidance of somebody who knows more than me. I don't have the answers right now. I want somebody else to give me some answers to think about. Is that part of it?
Yeah. No, that's great. I want people to give me answers about all the things I don't know or need help with, but I want to take responsibility for how I feel. and I want to take responsibility for my experience of life. So while I'm out there learning and growing and getting help from other people, if I fuck up, if I make a mistake, that's fine. I'm taking responsibility for how I deal with that. So maybe that's the sort of nuanced answer to that. Yeah, it's not like I can do it all, I know it all. Far from it. I want help and I need help, and I look for help and I read and I ask opinions. I look for role models all the time. But I want to take responsibility for my experience of that journey.
Yeah. I'm thinking of one of the previous conversations I had on this podcast. I so resonated with this girl. She said, there was a time in my life where I realized I felt so full of self-doubt. I was second guessing my decisions, or I was just caught in indecisiveness. And she said, instead of taking any action myself, all I did was spend hours late night Googling, trying to get some randomer on the internet to tell me what to do with my life, because I didn't know what to do. And I think it's so true. I've had that experience of looking up on random forums of the internet, like, what are the answers to this or to this? And what would you say to those people who are stuck in that space of having a lack of clarity, and they don't know how, or feel like they don't know how to find the answers within themselves? So they're tempted to continuously look up blog posts or read more and get more and more and more from everyone else's opinion to make up their mind.
I would say, first of all, congratulations for having the awareness so you haven't got clarity. And it is quite a big step. Well, you've got to decide, like, at a higher level, what's important to you. You've got your values, what's important to you. And often it's a question of conflict of values, and people want to, be successful, but they, want everything to happen the way they want it, or want everyone to like them, these kinds of things. So go to your values. And I would say as well, you're in the inertia of living. Living is moving and changing. You're already in the game. Now, to just suddenly change without having a bit of a perspective stop is quite hard. So you've got to find time to take out, to look at what's important to you in your life and your values. And when you do that, you'll then be in a place to maybe see it differently. If you're stuck in going to the same job every day, come home, you got kids, you're tired, you go to bed, it's a challenge to get a different perspective. And that's what your clarity is having a different perspective. You've got to find a way to look at it differently. And I also think about clarity in terms of, if you're the director of your life, which I'm guessing you want to be, and if you are going to take personal responsibility for that, imagine if you were taking directions from someone. You'd want them to be clear, wouldn't you? So if you're not getting the clear directions from them, you have to ask someone else, which is get a new perspective, get the person you're asking, to look at it differently, or ask someone else and get a new perspective. So I would say, you're in the inertia of living. If you've not got the clarity, you've got to somehow find time to relook at that. If you're lucky enough to have the luxury of going away for a weekend and start writing about your values, and I would pause and stop reading and writing and going to seminars and retreats for a little bit and just explore your own world of what's important to you and your values.
I think that's a great point, because I think we don't realize how much we often contribute to the cycles of overthinking by constantly consuming more and more information and feeling like almost further from having clarity, in effect, because we then feel like we're persuaded by one article that says this, but another well-worded one says it like this. So then you get into those parts where you can't make any steps forward. Do you say in those instances that that's where somebody should become aware of that, completely stop, switch off, and do something to go internally?
Yeah, you've got to go internally, really, if you're going to get your purest answers. And we do it all in our head a lot, don't we? Which is a logic and reasoning, but you really have to listen to your real brain, your heart, and your gut's got to be healthy too. But I would go to your heart and listen. And sometimes we're so in our world of kind of survival financially, and just as I keep saying, the inertia of living, that we're not able to see clearly. So you need to find a way to see more clearly yourself without all the overwhelm of information, because it's just overloading. And some people think, oh, this new book's come out, I'll read that, and that was going to change everything. Stop, pause, and start to think about what's really important to you, your values, and then you get to a higher level question of why were you created? And when you start getting answers to that, your own answers, your own philosophy around that, and it's not for me to give you my philosophy around that, but when you get your own philosophy and answers to that, then you have a clear sense of direction. In some ways, it doesn't matter about the little minutiae steps you make along the way, because you're driven in a direction and you feel whole and you feel like you're growing and contributing.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of a couple of, say, practical exercises. I actually just did my first wellness retreat. So this on the weekend, and I was very excited about that, and also shitting my pants. And I was like, okay, I've got to just move forward and start taking imperfect action and realize that the clarity that I'm seeking is only going to come through engagement in a direction rather than spinning endless thought cycles and getting held back by fear. So I went ahead and did it, and a few exercises that we did. So I want to play this off you and see what you would perhaps change. But you've spoken about core values. I completely agree that that's something that people should be more aware of or give some time to think about. But something that came back as feedback from people who came on the weekend was like, but I don't understand how I am supposed to select a few key values, like let's say 5, and how am I supposed to actually put them into practice? Because then there's lots of things here on this list that resonate with me. And how come I only have to choose 5 or something?
Okay, well, you can choose as many as you like. It's your choice, they're your values, but you will, like anything, have to prioritize. So the key thing is not your list of a million values, but it's prioritizing. And values to some people already get some more overwhelmed with a sense of, well, this sounds all kind of pseudo-therapeutic to me. It's just stuff you're drawn to. What do you like? What do you like doing? What's attracting you? And then the stuff that you want to move away from, your away values. And it doesn't matter how many are on your list, but what does matter are the most important ones to you, because if you're not kind of going in the direction of those, you're going to feel a little bit lost and empty and not sort of fulfilled.
Yeah. And I think the prioritization is a key piece, isn't it? And I think that's what often leads to so much overwhelm, because we have so many things on our to-do list or our bucket list of life, and often feel overwhelmed because we give everything equal importance. We feel like we need to do everything, but actually sometimes it's actually stepping back and realizing what are, say, the 3 most important things I could do today, or the 3 things that along those lines.
That's beautiful, that's beautiful. And as we're talking, I'm thinking we're talking a lot about core values and retreats, and really all this stuff is the same and distills down into very, very basic things. And if you just focus on whatever lessons you've learned from that retreat or from another book, it's the same stuff. It's self-love, it's focus, it's values, it's limiting beliefs. It's the same things. And what we're maybe not good at is, even when we get the clarity, is the action and the consistent training and conditioning to move in that direction. Because it's one thing having clarity about being a billionaire and having this sort of lifestyle and this health and this relationship, but there's another thing about becoming the person to do that and training and conditioning yourself.
And on that note, before we go over to the taking action, one of the questions that I actually asked myself before starting this interview was, like, have you or anyone listening considered the possibility that you actually don't want clarity, because actually having the clarity would mean you've got no more excuses as such to actually getting started, and thinking, if I knew that this is the exact person that I wanted to help and that's the exact next step that I want to take, then I have really got no excuse to just start making steps in that direction. And I think that's where the fear piece often comes up, isn't it? Like, I'm fear of failure, fear of making the wrong choice, fear of success. What happens if I'm successful and all of a sudden I have these responsibilities that I don't feel like I'm ready to handle yet? Like, so much of that plays under the surface, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is your unconscious protection kicking in. It's like you're looking for a relationship, but unconsciously you're picking people you don't have to commit to. It's not a great example of that. It's just happening all the time. Our unconscious. So we need to clear all that out by spending some time with ourselves, doing the inner work and focusing on those values. But I agree with that. The other thing about people say they haven't got clarity can sometimes be a mask for, I don't want to do the work. I don't want to give up the things. I don't want to make the sacrifices for that. So it's easier to say, oh, I'm not really sure what I want to do. I'm a bit lost. I haven't got any clarity.
Oh, so called out. Can you walk us through an example of that? Do you have a story to tell, something that like, oh, that's what that is, and the person wasn't even aware of it?
I mean, a lot of people, especially young people, want to be influencers, or they want to set up businesses. They want to make lots of money in the quickest possible time. Hooray to that. But, running a business, setting up any business is tough. It requires a lot of sacrifice, and the odds are quite stacked against it in the early stages. So there's an awful lot of sacrifice there. So you have to commit and take that sacrifice, put in the hours, be prepared to be vulnerable, risk some things to do that. And those are the barriers sometimes for people who say, they haven't got clarity. I just think if you want the goal, you need to be clear on the reason. And if the reason's strong enough, you'll get through all those sacrifices. Sometimes we want the goal, but we haven't really examined the reasons clearly enough. So I haven't got powerful enough fuel for when it gets hard. Maybe there's something around that.
So true. And I mean, it's interesting because I think companies, bigger companies especially, often do a better job of this than us as individuals, because companies will have things like value statement or a mission statement. And sometimes I wonder whether we could actually benefit from doing that for our own lives, because as you just point out, having a why that is strong enough to weather the struggles of the how, we often aren't clear on what that is.
Yeah, that's so true. No, we haven't got that answer at the highest level. What's your reason for being here? Why were you created? And that answer will only really come in some way from a service to other people, a contribution to something bigger than yourself, because everything in life in some way is connected to other things and supports other things. And so unless you've answered that at the highest level, there's always going to be an emptiness. And that's why so many of the spiritual books are about that contribution and so on.
Yeah, so true. I'm curious with your own story here, like somebody who's made a lot of pivots, like you were working in marketing, Nike and Adidas for a while. You had multiple businesses, I think. Now you have a foundation, you're working with young people, like you're somebody who has made a lot of pivots. And obviously, you have to have some level of clarity to do that. You're not just following the motions, you're making changes in your life. You're maybe in the driver's seat, to use your analogy from before. What helped you make those decisions to sidestep or change direction quite significantly?
I thought you were going to say I mustn't be very clear if I've done all these different things. I suppose I'm just trying to meet my needs for variety, and I'm curious and I'm hungry. And as much as I've had many businesses, my motivation isn't accumulation of wealth. It's been grabbing experiences and growing and learning. And so that's possibly what's led me in different directions as well.
Yeah. And actually, I love that you mentioned variety, because that's a key component of happiness, actually. I can't remember a study that recently came out of a university in the States, but actually one of the key components was variety. And I think we all feel that when feel like we're stuck in a rut, things are too samey. And then I think sometimes that gets so bad that the fear diminishes. So what was blocking us previously from taking action, all of a sudden you've just, enough is enough, I've got to make a change in my life. And then you finally start making the steps forward.
It's beautiful. I love the way you said that. And to me, you've got to enjoy your life. My thing's all about you have fun and help people. It's no more complicated than that. And I always ask myself, am I having fun and am I helping people? In fact, I've got 3 questions. How can I help? What can I learn? And am I enjoying it? How can I make this more fun? And that it's as simple as that. And a lot of that for me would come by new experiences, which has led to variety. So I think that is important. It'd be pretty boring if we were doing the same stuff and knew that was going to be it for the rest of our days.
Yeah, I mean, I can literally hear this in your voice and how you talk about. There's a lightheartedness, I think, that I can feel that you bring. It's funny you bring up that point about fun, because going back to what I said earlier about this retreat that I started, I had made all the plans. Of course, I wanted to know the ins and outs of everything. I wanted to control everything. That's making a control freak, perfectionistic person coming out, how it's going to plan out on this day and so on, realizing in the end, you can't control any of that. But I think the moment where I was almost ready to quit out of fear and not take that action, which we'll come on to now, was when I lost the sense of fun. So I love that you mentioned that, because all of a sudden I was like, hold on a second, why was I doing this in the first place? And part of that was because I wanted to share. I wanted to be in a community. And I think it's important to have those reminders sometimes of how like you say, how can you make this more fun? Why are you doing this? You're choosing this because you wanted something that made you feel alive and joyous. And all of a sudden, when we get stuck in the how to make it happen, we get caught up in a lot of tedious, unnecessary details that make you enjoy your life far less.
Yeah, this aliveness and joyness, that's part of the gift you have. And when you have more of that, you'll be better for everyone else too. So it's better for you and better for everyone too. It's a big thing to me, keeping it light, really. I mean, I try and avoid hanging out with people who don't keep it light. I want to help them, but after a while, I find it's quite heavy going. The waves of energy coming from that are challenging. And when you think you're hanging out with yourself, this is the one consistent throughout your life. So you want to make your life and your person you're hanging out with you fun and light. And that comes through how you look at things and how you talk to yourself. So keep it light, 100%.
But then what about if, just devil's advocate here, I've heard people say, but that could be a level of spiritual bypassing, or that could be that you're avoiding discomfort. You just want to keep everything fun and light, but actually you're entirely avoiding facing the stuff you need to face. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say that, ultimately spiritual awareness is about light, and light is an energy wave and a frequency, and fun is frequency and energy. So you could approach it from that way and say keeping things light and fun is a better energy frequency, and you're going to attract more of that back into your life, and it's going to be a better thing that you're going to give to others as well. And I have to say, there isn't much stuff that can't be made more fun. There isn't much stuff that can't be made more fun. So I'm not saying bypass difficult things and challenging things like death, like illness, natural disasters, war. These are serious matters, but there isn't much in those moments that can be made slightly lighter on a human level.
What do you do to make things more fun?
Well, that's just a way of looking at things, isn't it? Reminding myself, is it that serious? Is it really that important in the whole scheme of things? And usually the question is not. And it feels better. And once you do that, you get in a habit of just automatically want to go to that place because that feeling is better than it's a much better feeling. And you'll find other people prefer to be around you when you're in that position as well. It's not talking about faking it and pretending to be all full of happiness when things are challenging, but have a place you go to automatically, a kind of unconscious emotional place you go to, which is light, and try and see things in a way which is light. Maybe I was helped with that through my upbringing. I was born up in Belfast. Things are kept light there as well. In many ways, how you look at things, you can't, your ego can't get out of hand there. Maybe that was part of it as well. But I definitely find it's a much more fun place to be with yourself if you try and keep things light.
Yeah. I'm curious on that front though, because you said about Belfast being lighter, and then you grew up during the Troubles where there was a lot of religious conflict. How did that play out? Or was that an escape from all of that? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, maybe when you're young, it's an escape from all that. But there's definitely something in Ireland and a lot of northern cities as well in the UK where you're not really given space to take yourself too seriously and grow too much of an ego. And Northern Ireland's an interesting one. I'd come home from school and you'd walk up a street, and you'd often get stopped and asked what religion you were. And if you said the wrong answer, you get a bit of a beating.
No way.
And so that gets you to ask questions about life, and that's a unhealthy thing, and it can be traumatic and so on. But there's a whole thing around that maybe gets you to look at life in a different way. And whether it was a coping thing for me, I don't know. But it's led me to a good place now where I try and keep things light.
Do you think it also increases your ability to handle stress?
Yeah, because you're looking at it differently, aren't you? You're trying to keep a perspective on it and so on. And the big buzz thing, and of course, therapy at the moment is trauma. Everything's trauma, trauma, trauma. And I listen to people talking about trauma in such a way that you can just feel their cells are getting stressed. Talking about it and reliving and replaying, and the pathways in their brain are causing them to be tight and stressed. If you can find a way to keep things light, it doesn't have to be laugh at it and dismiss it and it wasn't important. But there's always a way of keeping things slightly lighter. And as I said at the beginning, I carry around those 3 questions. How can I help? What can I learn? And how can I make it more fun?
Yeah, I like that. Let's go over to taking action. Obviously, this is another key piece. And first question I have for you here is, what do you think of the idea that if you do not have, let's say, exact clarity, you're still working it out, but you recognize that you've perhaps been thinking about this for too long? And would you say in those instances that people should just start taking some action rather than thinking about it?
Action breeds more action because you see the results of that and you're in a different place. So you see differently. But the moment you decide to do anything, you have to actually do something. Otherwise, you haven't really made a decision. You just had a bit of a dream. So I think you have to take action. If you say, well, I haven't got clarity. Well, you must have some clarity because you're going to get through your day today. You've got some things you're going to do. And you go, yeah, well, I might at a weekend go for a run. Well, the moment you say, I might at a weekend go for a run, you need to translate that into going for the run and taking some action. Otherwise, it becomes something that's easy to put off and change. So you need to make some decisions. And at the moment of making the decisions, you need to take action about that decision. And when you do that, you'll start to appreciate the benefits of doing it. And it's a sort of self-discipline thing, really, that kind of self-fulfills itself the more you do that.
So, what about if somebody is okay, so let's go over to how we can lower the pressure a little bit to actually encourage taking action and rather than getting caught in fear. Like, what are some practical things that people could do here?
Well, understand first of all, in the moment of choice, whether to take action or not, you're in charge of that. Unless you're waiting for something else to tell you that, you're in charge, and that comes back to the personal responsibility thing. So you have the choice. A very simple example would be, I can stay in tonight and I can have a massive piece of chocolate cake and loads of unhealthy food, or I can go for a run. And I'm sitting there trying to make those choices. Now, who's going to make the choice for me? I am. So I'm in control of that. And then when I understand what's happening in my brain to make that choice, I can then go, aha, I'm not going to be overruled by my brain because my brain's just there to serve me. And it's going to tell me chocolate cake tastes really tasty. Going for a run, it's wet, it's cold. That's not going to be as comfortable. That's what your brain does. You have to be in charge and say, aha, yes, but I know the runs are the right thing to do. So I have to train my brain to focus on the moments after the thing you don't want to do and how that's going to feel. So what's it going to feel like after the thing you've done, eating the cake, and then amplify that to be really painful, and then focus on the thing which you should do and amplify that to be really pleasurable. And you'll start training your brain in a way that you'll go to the thing that you know you should do. And over time, that process will happen much quicker and you won't even be thinking about it. You just go for the run, go for the run, go for the run. And it's a long answer to your question, but it really comes down to you realizing you're in charge of your brain and you control it. Otherwise, your brain's going to throw up a million scenarios. I can go tomorrow. I went yesterday. I'll go a little run. I'll have half the cake, override it and take charge and don't negotiate.
Yeah. Okay. I see. It's true. It's hard to do in practice. And I think a lot of people would say, but I don't have that. How do I have that self-discipline? How do you do something when you don't feel like it? Do you have any tips on that front?
Well, Jim Rohn's got a great quote, hasn't he? You know, you either pay the price of self-discipline or you pay the price of regret. And you have to ask yourself, when you haven't done something, how do you feel about that? Because that feeling will last a long time. And, you know, we say it's hard, but that's a story you've put in. It's hard. It's hard to live with regret. It's really hard to live with stuff you know you shouldn't have done. Even if you just kind of put it out of your mind in a little bit of time, in your unconscious and in your body, you know you're regretting it. So what will happen is if you realize you can train your brain, and the first time, yeah, it's going to be different, which might feel hard. But once you do that, you will go to that thing that you've called hard because that is what builds your esteem because you've impressed yourself. And you know that wasn't an easy choice, but you did it. And doesn't that feel good? And that feels good. And then you won't even think twice about it. You're like, yeah, I'll go for one, maybe eat a cake later. Who knows? But I'm going to go for the run and it'll feel great.
Yeah, it's really a key point to self-confidence because I think a lot of people linked with this, whether it's clarity or imperfect action or whatever, they feel like, well, I don't have enough confidence to do this thing that I've been entertaining in my head, not realizing that actually confidence is built on action. Like you will only feel that when you have a bank of experiences to draw upon to say, oh, well, I've done that before, so I should be able to do this again. Or that it builds gradually over time. I think we often dismiss that.
And there's a difference between confidence and capability, because you've got to ask yourself, have you got the capability? And most of the time you will have. Confidence comes down to what other people think of you usually and other people's value of you, where that self-esteem and impressing yourself is really the thing that will build your real self-confidence. Yeah. And you've got the capability. We get confused and we say, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. When You could do that, but you're probably worried about what someone will think about you doing that. And just to go back to this thing about it's hard, who said it was to be easy? This is maybe as well, we are become culturally programmed to think things are easier and quicker. Who said it was easy to make a lot of money and run a business? Who said it was easy to be a top level athlete? Who said it's easy to have a great relationship?
So true. Actually makes me think of one of the common threads of imposter syndrome. I know this is something that's spoken about quite a lot. And a key component of that is people assuming that something should be easy. And if it's not, then that's a reflection of them. That therefore they're not cut out to start their own business, or they're not cut out to go and move to another country and try something new, instead of seeing it as, I've just got this underlying belief that I have acquired on some level from who knows where in my life that told me, oh, I think that this should be easy. Not actually ever stepping back and having the awareness piece of going, where is that belief coming from anyway? And is this useful or even correct?
Yeah, that's so true as well. And if that's hindering you thinking about it in terms of it's hard or it should be easy, get rid of those words. Don't use those words around it. That's a useful thing to do, or that's a helpful thing to do, or that's going to get me in the right. But as soon as you say hard, your brain's already going hard, hard. It wants you to go to
Avoid.
easy. You're already making it harder to overcome your brain, because you say to your brain hard or easy, it's going to go to easy. That's what it's going to try and help you do, make an easier path. So I try maybe and avoid those words. I don't mind the word hard. I go to hard a lot of the time because it builds and builds, and you impress yourself when you do hard. If you run a marathon, you impress yourself because you achieved it.
Yeah, true. Do you have are there any myths or things that you feel like you come across, you're like, oh, that is so unhelpful as it relates to clarity or taking action moving forward?
Well, I think in the mental health field, there's a lot, isn't there? Because we have defaulted to the answer to any mental health issue is in medication or therapy. And mental health is determined by the interplay of lots of things personal to you, and you need to examine those things. And so, like a lot of people, I have quite an issue with the amount of medication that's given out for people who are just struggling with conventional emotional issues. And so in that area, I think there's a lot we could do to kind of help people understand that emotional pain is part of living, emotional distress is part of living, and you need to examine what it is that's causing you emotional stress rather than looking for an easy solution outside of yourself to fix you, which comes back to the whole realize your power and your sense of empowerment.
Yeah. I'm going to move into a final fast few questions now, Alan. And the first thing I wanted to ask you is there something that you used to believe that you no longer believe?
Father Christmas, I'm sure people say that to you a lot. Something I believe that I no longer believe.
Big shift that you've had in your life where you're like, wow, I carried this belief around for a while and now I've got rid of that.
I suppose at a high level, being really honest, I used to think relationship problems were other people were the problem. Life problems were other people were the problem. Business problems were other people the problem. And your problems are your own problems. You're the creator of your problems because it's ways of looking at things and how you are. And so that probably was a big one for me. Relationships. Yeah. I used to be a bad picker because unconsciously I was doing things to fulfill some needs there. And I was blaming other people if relationships weren't working.
Was that like trying to fix or help?
I had a thing about unconsciously picking people I wouldn't have to commit to because I was scared of commitment, fear of being hurt, I suppose. And so that was quite a big one for me. And then also around that, if things weren't working the way I wanted them, which is probably like a control thing, you would blame other people and try and get them to do something in the way that you wanted them to do. And I know a little bit about your background. You've had a lot of experience in that area as well. So, yeah.
Good lessons to learn. Second, what is one quote or affirmation that resonates with you on the topics we've spoken about today?
I mean, I suppose it comes down to the thing, if you want to change your life, you have to change yourself. That's where it starts. This is born out of another Jim Rohn quote. He's got some great quotes. Is if you want things to change, you have to change. It's the simplest thing, but we're looking for things outside of ourselves to change to make us feel better. And you need to take that back and take ownership of that. And you need to change things inside to make yourself feel better. And then your world outside will change too.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly his quote, but I have read some things from Jim Rohn before, and I think he talks about like the four seasons of change and how we're either inspired enough to want to make change, or we're hurt enough that we have to make change. Or
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
lastly, what is a closing message that you'd like to finish on to our listeners who are seeking to have a little bit more clarity on what they want out of life?
Yeah. I probably go back to those things about, how can you help? What can you learn? And how can you have more fun? If you keep that as a kind of guiding compass, you'll not go too far wrong. And that will also steer you if you're searching for more clarity in your life. And if you have that, that feeds into the overall sense of purpose and why you're here. What's your reason for being here? And that nothing exists just for itself. You have to have some contribution beyond just yourself. You are anyway. So maybe you can make it a contribution that makes you feel more fulfilled.
Alan, thank you so much for sharing your story, some of your wisdom with us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Thank you.
And if anyone is interested in connecting with you or finding out more about what you do, where could they get that?
You can go to realizeyourpower.com or you don't need therapy.com. Both of those will find me and you can see some of the work I'm doing. You can get access to the books and so on.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Alan.
Thank you and have a beautiful day.
You too.